Everybody to your project. Hai. Kita jauh nanti. Kita hati mula. Jadi apa yang ngomong dalam pagi.
Yang nhận về nè.
Baik jam sudah.
Đây.
Jadi gue gede. Ya, ini nak kita kalau kita.
Bao lên chào.
Cô không được phải khẩn lên.
Ok, này nói trước kia tôi dùng video.
Tiêu ta nó đi tung nghe tung bên kìa.
Thì lời đến trên bên trên.
Tung bên kìa nó uống.
Atung bên ngoài.
Atung bên đỏ sao thiếu.
Nói không được, sakin cái đến chiang tụt na khát là sini. Thì phần đó.
Bây giờ cô này tôi lại làm bay đến tiền phần này ạ. Họ cũng đúng mày đi.
Mi dong ali la pai khi apa khi tai be.
Đi là gì đấy mà.
Bây giờ cô ý quân này phải ra lại.
Nó ba lâu.
Người muốn lại bên. Anh lên coi à?
Ayin lian hi saka. Pagala. Dajap pung pai pi pe umanche. Ta pe sunga ma he.
Cái làm mày.
Wa hit wa thum na. Hi pan in thum in li. Hi mo to bo mi thum na. Mo to bom pan sin.
Hạt mì thum.
He tua mo to tun na, tua mo to tun na. He. He.
À.
Dậy bút lệ.
Mà vô bên quỷ tình gì à?
Thì làm sao được?
Cái làm mò.
Wala nang nakim tengah kaluti be nang wawa Kamsang ka. Kasi nga ba paina sa sabi. Lang ka din sin dia. Tom thay sin dia.
Boleh.
Ama pen.
Wah pen. Tunggu tu. Supaya tu. Huan, 2, 3, 4. Hey, bang xuống lon luôn. Buồn kia cài phi. Ai muốn lên đi qua. Bilang pakai lemak.
Cái dạy bắt tăng hay là? Đây chính tên à? Kìa, không dạy tao lẹ.
Cài phi. Cài phi.
Nó là hi tao út xua ra.
Còn đựng mà phát để vài những cái
이만 태어나 제일 다 내가 다 밑에서 딱คนรวยนี่แหละโอ้ยลูกยังใส่บัตรเสียปากจบโอ้ยอยากโอ้ยเพราะไม่ได้ยังอีกทุกท่าเกี่ยวกับท่าใส่
hitting the lắm biết cái khác lắm biết cái khác nhiệt 누구 처음 가면 되는 Hello.
Where'd you get all these kids? Sanitarium. Heard of all that? Heard of the Battle Creek Sanitarium?
Yes,
Dr. Kellogg?
Yeah.
Good. Good. Well, Pastor Loughborough started out as a 16-year-old minister. He felt like he wanted to go out and preach, so he put his Bible and his best clothes in his bag and started off. His pants were about 6 inches too long. He was a poor person who wanted to join the ministry. When they came to Battle Creek, he then finally met his wife, and as a family does, they started having children. John and Mary lost their first child, and then they lost their second child, and then in the third pregnancy they lost the baby, and then John lost his wife. That time there was very early in healthcare and in medical science, so the loss of the wife was a little common, more common than it is today. So out here in Oak Hill Cemetery, which is about 3 miles from here, back in 1860s it was a long buggy ride, no cars, a long 3-mile buggy ride. And on the grave marker it says that the baby is held in his mother's arms. So the Adventist Church was brought about to meet many human needs. One is for a comfort for those unanswerable deaths in life and the pain that we all have when we lose our children or our family members. So that's one of the blessings of the Adventist Church. There are many things that were improved because of it. One of them was health care. You know, we have the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Dr. Kellogg began to improve health care in America. Loma Linda University continues to do that. And much of what we know about health prevention started with the Adventist Church. Questions?
So the same cemetery discovered energy way, the same cemetery.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
You said that far from here, like 3 miles.
3 miles away. You could go there. We have a map how to find your way there.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe you might have to.
How much time do you have today?
I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah, if we in case maybe if we need, I will to
Okay.
the address.
We'll get you the map out of here. Okay. How much time do you have to stay here today?
It's okay. We have time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should have you done about 4:30.
And that.
And the cemetery doesn't close until dark.
Này lý lằng đúng rồi. Cái bên bằng gì à?
This is a schoolhouse, so we have the desks are child-proof. I think everything else will have to just be careful.
Qua mình nào có hiểu được cái gì à? Then sangin hi. Then do it the sangin. Cái cầm sáng sáng cắt à mới bền.
sáng này khi đổ đi ngay rồi cái cầm này áp phốt khi đi ngay rồi 근데 또 그게 참 되게 stories established in the 18th century so that many when they were discovered I'll tell you a story
Ấy lùng hiếm bỏ rẻ. Mà nó nghiền nấm lùa.
Let me tell you about this building and how it became the first Seventh-day Adventist school in Battle Creek. In 1856, Ellen White and James White moved here, and Dr. Kellogg was here as a school-age boy, and there was a man who was a retired or a worn-out school teacher who needed some rest and recreation to improve his health, and he went to Dr. Kellogg's sanitarium. Part of his therapy was to work in the garden and to rest and to go through some of Dr. Kellogg's treatments. As he was put in a room with another male roommate who was also there, who was a church member, he noticed how kind and friendly the other man was to him. He also noticed that this man prayed for him at night out loud. And so he eventually began to wonder what made these Adventist people so different. James and Ellen White, who were living here at that time, had children who were school-aged. They found out about this man. His name was Goodloe Harper Bell, Mr. Bell. They found out about Mr. Bell and asked if he would mind teaching the boys some reading and writing. Back then when you went to schools, education was real basic, just the things you needed. Now this actual building was not a Seventh-day Adventist school, but when the people who owned the building, the school district that owned the building, heard that the church was going to have a museum or a display here, they donated this building to the village. And so the people from the village went out, took it apart, and moved it back here, and then put it all back together. So we can tell the story about Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell eventually became so well known that James White helped start a school by letting the bottom floor of the Review and Herald building here in Battle Creek become the school, and Mr. Bell lived upstairs. So that's the story. It first started out with James White's children. He had 3 children of school age that time. And then Dr. Kellogg's parents were also here. They wanted to send 5 or 6 of their children. So he started out with about 10 kids. Gasoline car wouldn't scare the other horses. So he called this a horsey horse. So he thought the face of a horse would keep the other horses from being startled by this funny looking, noisy. You were thirsty, I'd give you some water out of here. If you were thirsty, I'd give you water out of the same ladle in you. So pretty soon, if he had a cold, you and I, and he also had a cold. So through the Bible and through Dr. Kellogg, they began to understand that hygiene meant to keep things separate. So they began to come up with separate cups. And that was just a growing base of knowledge that the Adventist Church was able to take part in. So are there any questions?
No touch. No touch. Only.
Kamsangin. Ini Pak biar Kimnu.
Yang kena. Ni.
Yakin. Không khen chân mà không khen chân.
Em mới ra trong kia kìa. Sao thế?
Dạ.
Rút kìa.
Apu set này là vậy chăng à?
Apu set này rồi chứ bằng.
Cái system này này cũng đâu vậy?
System này cũng đấy. Khen hạn nữa.
So this is called the Parkerville Church of Christ Second Advent. That was the original name for this church. And this was a church which was about 60 miles south of here in a city called Parkerville. So this was called the Parkerville Church. It was a very small farming community, and they wanted, after hearing Ellen White and James White and other Adventist preachers, here's some pictures, they wanted to have their own church. So several years down the road, they had a church dedication. Pastor Loughborough, who we first heard about, was their evangelist. And so at their church dedication, which was on January 12, 1861, James and Ellen White were invited. Pastor Loughborough, Pastor Andrews, Joseph Wagner, and another preacher whose picture I don't have, his name was Byington. At the church dedication, the whole community was invited. This was before there was lots of entertainment and recreation available at home. So everybody, when there was something social happening in town, everybody was invited. So in 1861, people had heard of James and Ellen White.
Không cần. Thực phẩm à? Nhiều cái. Thành, phải ạ. ไปแล้วนี่แค่ได้ไปแล้วInten siktigil palo in kelam na in ya inen pang jauh na mi
siktukil palo akila me
imo
sik palo dia kong palo ma
They can eat rice too.
siktukil palo
Apa now
This has logs for seats for the guests. And there are some
Cái tài lúc
oh sing ta kiyek ta balai ma
tâm thì tâm mới tao om dê của mình khỏi thiếu mà
na pang ta hu
tâm thì om dê mà
I'll open this door so we'll get some fresh air.
dong di
Have a seat and I'll tell you all about
Donop na ne te dong donop am ya chị te dong ta
If you should go to the cemetery today, there's a grave marker out there, and it's called the most honest man in town. And that's who lived in a house like this. This also was a home someplace else, and somebody in the community heard about the Adventist village and they donated this log cabin. And volunteers from the historic ministries had to go out, take it down, move it back here, and then put it all back together. So it was quite a project. And while they were doing it, they put in a cement block foundation under it and made the ground preparation for building this. And then they put on the stones that you see along the outside on the front of those blocks so that it'll look like it's a right kind of foundation for that time period. This was the home of the most honest man in town, and he was the first Seventh-day Adventist in Battle Creek. The first Adventist in Battle Creek. How he became an Adventist was Joseph Bates, who was a retired sea captain, became a Millerite Adventist preacher. And Joseph Bates was riding a train from Benton Harbor to Jackson, Michigan, which is along Interstate 94. And he had a dream that he should go to Battle Creek, Michigan. He had a dream that he tied up his boat. He was a sea captain, so he dreamed about his boat. They should tie up his boat in Battle Creek. When he got to Jackson, he knew some other Millerites, the Palmers. He told them about his dream. And they said, well, there isn't any place to tie up a boat in Battle Creek, but there is a river. And there is a train. So he took the train to town. And when he got here to town, he was a traveling preacher. Matter of fact, he had a bag full of his belongings. Then he had one of these charts in the bottom of his bag. It's a chart on Daniel and Revelation. Many preachers of that time had rolls like that. They would roll them out and be able to preach from that. Because not everybody had a Bible like that. So when Joseph Bates got to the train station, he stopped and asked the postmaster. He said, who is the most honest man in town? And the name he mentioned was the man who lived in this house. So he got out of the post office and came right up to this house. When he got to the home, he knocked on the door and he said, I have some most wonderful news to share with you. And the wife came to the front door and said, well, you can't share it till after we've had breakfast. So after breakfast, they had worship. And that's when Joseph Bates rolled out his poster and tacked it up on the wall in the log cabin. and worship lasted. Everybody had a well at their home. So if you could put your oldest child, you could put your buckets on here like this, fill this up, and if you could talk the person into walking real fast, then you could have this running water. Call this running water to get them to run back fast enough. Otherwise, you'd have to carry it and it'd be real slow. This was also used for cattle. So many of the
นี่เป็นซิกตุกิลปาแล้วว่าอินกิลัมนา7 Adventist ส่งมาสเปนปานี่เป็นกำสังนูอินเฮียเจมส์โอ้ยน้องเลี้ยวเตะอาศัยบอดเลี้ยวเจ้อาศัยบอดตัวนึงเลี้ยเขาเจ้
Look at Rich now. Rich now like that.
กำสังนูอินเหรอมีกำสังนูอิน
Oh, kaya marami lang.
เดิมไม่เชื่อพี่นั่งกระบุดบุญเลยละแกนั่งขนมบุญยังไงเป็นเลยนั่งตัวที่เป็นหวังใช่หรือทางตัวไหนไหมแรงเจนเล่นตัวต่อเด็กก็ต้องชงไม่เก๋คุยก็อย่าชนคุยไม่
หืมที่เป็นกำสังนุอินอนุงลำปันฮีเฮ้ยตัวคิดกว่ามันหนาคอยหลงต้องพี่กว่ามันหนาคอยหลงดิเฮ้ยน่ะเฮ้ยสติกว่ามันหนาคอยหลงดิเอาค่อยบอกตลอดคิวดิเฮ้ยมุนกิมตัวเฮ้ยได้คอยเขาหลงดิ
มันเบสมันจุกอันนั้นเท่ไม่ค่อยดีแล้วสิเบสมันบอกบ้าลงเนี่ยโยนอะไรน้ำตักมังก็ได้เป็นอะไรโอ้จ้าฮิตฮะอัดตุยปั๊มหนังได้ก็ได้เกี่ยวเป็นสิ่งนี้ตุยปั๊มหนังเฮ้ยคอยได้กี่ฟุตบอลคอยหลงไอ้อุดรเดียวคอยปะปะนั่นเพียง
Back in that time, they bought this lot, two lots wide, and enough lumber to build this building. The first part of the building was just to that back wall right there. Then they added this two on the side later. But they were able to buy the lots, the ground, and the lumber to build the first half of the building for $780 or something. Back in 1856, dollars were more valuable, and the prices were better. So this kitchen was added later, after the Whites lived here for a while. And as you can imagine, Mrs. White was very friendly and would invite lots of people home for Sabbath dinner because she knew they had traveled a long way to come to church that day. So she became the potluck committee, and she had many guests in her home. So they decided they needed a bigger kitchen. She was very busy. James White and herself were either writing or working or visiting or they had Sabbath duty to preach, you know, every other Sabbath or something, depending on how many people were in the church. So one day James White noticed that Mrs. White was inefficient with her time because she had to go down to the community well to gather water. So James White, Pastor White, took a way to collect water off the roof of the house, and he put it in some kind of a pipe and piped it into the ground. So he made this a cistern, a water collecting cistern. And when they bought the house, they established the basement, and they looked in here and they found this hole in the ground. So people looked up the story and figured out that that's what that was. This was James White's cistern. So when they remodeled the house, they left a window so people could see that. We think they could probably pump it up here with a hand pump. They could put it in a large bucket or a small for kitchen use, maybe for cleaning, for bathing, or for some cooking. I don't know how clean the water was for drinking. Maybe they drank it too. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it is today, taste-wise. So this is a typical 1860s wood-fired heater and cook stove. And there's several ways to put wood in. There's a side door, a front door, or you could even use this to look in and see how hot the fire is. What do you have in your kitchen? Just turn the dial. No. This involved somebody had to fill the wood box, had to keep the wood dry. It was quite a bit more work in the 1860s. So this was how they would put the wood in. This would be the cooking part, and this is the baking. This is the oven. And you could keep your bread warm on the top or dry, keep your water warm. Some people would even run some kind of a rope across here where you could dry things. Dry apples or herbs, seasonings. You could dry things in your kitchen near this big source of heat. Have you ever seen an Amish family? Do you have any Amish or Mennonites?
Oh, we never see it.
Never seen them? Well, the Amish and the Mennonites have great big wooden cook stoves in their house. They're like 6 or 8 burners wide. And on the top of their stoves, they have a big shelf where they can dry things or keep them warm. This is a small compared to that. One of the stories that I like to tell is, in a pot like this, Mrs. White put some water and some wheat flour. She had a barrel of wheat out here in the pantry, and she was making some glue. They used it for paste. Sometimes you have to use paste to put wallpaper on, so you could just heat the water and the wheat flour until it became sticky enough. Then you'd have to spread it on real thin to make a wallpaper paste. The other thing you could use it for is to glue books together. Glue the binding of the book together. So James and Ellen White came here to bring the Adventist Review and Herald press, the publishing work. So they were making glue to take back to the publishing house to hold the books together. Well, Mrs. White had an urgent request from a neighbor to go help the neighbor. So the way you turn down the stove is you turn off the air. So you close everything up and you turn the air off, and then the stove would get slower burning and it would be cooler, just a little bit cooler. So the glue was simmering instead of on hide. So she left this on the stove, just to keep it warm. And her sons, her two sons came back from school and they saw something on the stove and they thought it was lunch. So I don't know if you'll follow this, but later that day Mrs. White saw them. You could use this if you had some garlic. You could squeeze the garlic out and then you could put it in the stew. Something like that. And you have different things like this for spreading out oil or something like that. You'd have to crush things, crush your seasonings or your spices up in one of these. So that was the top of this. This is the cooktop. And I didn't know I was going to have so many guests, so I made some rolls. Anybody hungry? Did you bring any butter or some tahini? You ever had tahini? Sesame butter?
No.
Nut butter? You're not hungry? This will be hard on your teeth. Have you ever made homemade popcorn?
Yeah.
I think this would be good to make popcorn in. But it's like a bread warmer. You could make some tea or warm the water for making a soup or something. There's a little bar of soap over there. You can see they made it from animal fat. It doesn't have much fragrance, but you feel the stickiness of it. You can rub your finger on it.
감도 잼뭐
Gan hin thao tầm học bao rồi.
Produce, right there.
감도 진짜 이거 뭐 있던 거 김누 백기
So next we can go into the next.
Đừng có thằng phải chứ.
So this is a little bit about the ministry of the whites when they first came. So this was their family home. This is where they worked on sharing their gospel message. And this is how this house was restored, how it was reconditioned. But first off, I'll start with the family. The Whites had 4 boys. The oldest boy to the youngest boy. So the oldest boy, Henry, was born in 1847, right down to the baby. People have rubbed their fingers on this, but this was September 1860 when he was born. And this is little John Herbert. He was the baby. John Herbert had a very short life. He only lived about 3 months, 12 weeks. He had a type of a bacterial infection, and it manifested itself in his neck. It was very painful. It got inside of his lymph nodes in his neck. You know how you get those real thick sores when you get an infection? His became very severe. Mrs. White had to hold him in his arms to comfort him. And he only lived for those few short months. So not only did the Loughboroughs have to make that long, sad ride to the cemetery, James and Ellen White had to do that also. living in the 1860s was tough on people. Medical care wasn't as good. There wasn't as much hope. I think that's one thing that God wants to build into our lives is more hope, more courage. On that long buggy ride to the cemetery with John Herbert, the oldest boy, Henry, confided to his mother, he said, if I ever die when I'm young, he says, will you bury me next to John Herbert so he won't be out there so much by himself? He won't be all alone. Well, unfortunately, 3 years later, he was traveling with his dad out in Massachusetts and in the Boston area and along the England, along the eastern coast of America, and he caught pneumonia and he passed away. So they had lost 2 sons, and they
waiting. Any will be. Hello, he better man among us on Donna. I let him know wait on that. Don't buy that. Huh? Hello, Paul cut there.
ที่เป็นองค์ไฟลายองค์พระพิลายที่เป็นเอาองศาคุ้มขัดกรมันจะเป็นยังไง
Oh, him more.
ข้อมจังเลย
This is called the family room, or back then they called it a parlor, a visiting room, a parlor. This is where you would entertain your guests. If I lived in Rockford and I had you over for dinner, I would have you all sit in my parlor, my guests, while dinner was being warmed up. So the Whites had sort of a routine in their home. Each morning they would get up and they would have breakfast. This was the first kitchen. When the first house, before they moved and expanded back, that was their first kitchen. They had a very small kitchen. So the boys would sleep over here, mom and dad upstairs, maybe with one of the babies, and when the babies were young. So they'd have a routine in the house. After breakfast they'd have worship, singing, prayer, and some Bible reading. Worship and Bible reading might be the same. As the boys got older, they all learned how to sing, and James White was a good vocalist too. He would often sing in church service. So if you were walking by and the Whites were having worship, you could maybe hear James White's booming voice. Also, they have a box of marbles. The marbles were made from a natural substance like clay. They would get it from the ground if they were digging, and they'd roll it into something round. And if your mother was busy writing a book or had some company, you'd roll the clay up on this, and it would be a little softer, so it would roll quieter. Wouldn't make as much noise. James White's parents and Mrs. White's parents also came to visit. So this part of the house over here where we sat down was called the in-laws' quarters. So if your family came to visit, they had their own section of the house. And that was added later. The reason it's up like that is because they didn't have any way to grade the ground. They didn't have a bulldozer to level the ground, so they would just build up to the next level. They would add the foundation under there. This is where the boys could look out that window, and across the street, James White's dad eventually moved and decided to stay, so he bought a house right across the street from there. So one Sunday morning, the older boy noticed that Grandpa was outside working. He made shoes. He was what's called a cobbler. So he made like saddles and leather goods, and he also made, his main line was shoes. One day they noticed Grandpa was out there making shoes on a Sunday morning. And the oldest boy went out and said, "Grandpa, do you know what day it is today?" He said, "Yes, it's Sunday, and I'm working today." When he first came, he was a Methodist deacon. He was a Methodist minister, and they called him Deacon. His original plan was when he came here, he was going to go to church on Sabbath with his son and go to church on Sunday with his Methodist friends. But after he was here a while, he decided to just go to church one day a week, and he chose the Sabbath to follow what his son was teaching. So that's why his grandson wondered if he was getting older and forgot what day it was that day, as some older people do. More and more Americans have brain issues because of the way they live, their diet, lack of exercise, maybe smoking, things like that, and their arteries begin to give out. So Grandpa was an Adventist, and he worked 6 days a week instead of having 2 days off. Do you have any questions or see anything that looks curious?
Yala sino dong di?
Mang là sao đâu?
Ano wala siya kuya?
The opening is the big Bible was what? Is the Bible or what?
There were many Bibles in that time. Some of them were very heavy, and there's a great big Bible in the Welcome Center where we first met. But the Welcome Center had a big Bible. Mrs. White had a vision where she held up a big Bible in one hand, and she was quoting from the text without even looking at them. That's the Bible that most people are interested in. There's a bigger Bible in the Welcome Center that weighs much. This one only weighs 11.5 pounds. The big one in the Welcome Center is almost twice that high. Twice as full. It's like 7, 8 more pounds heavier. So our last stop will be upstairs.
Oh, last
Go
time.
ahead. And, your shoes get tired.
Oh, yeah.
Now this will go up the stairs and around into the front bedroom. Let me go first. When they built the house, they didn't make for very big steps. They didn't make them very wide, and you can see that's where the house ended right there. So there are steep stairs, but I think everybody will be able to make them if they're careful. And there's one handrail. Please use the rail if you need to.
Hi in tung kan. Tôm này kan. Chín tao.
Ama lumi dei ting ama. Tek se.
Sit on the end. The kids can sit on the floor if you want to. So this is what the house looked like when the church bought it back there. That's the condition of the wallpaper, and they just kept it there so you could see how deteriorated the house was, the condition. So this is Mrs. White's bedroom. This is where she would sleep. Maybe the baby had a crib here. There's a wood box, you can't see it, but a small wood box. And this is a little bedroom fireplace. And the stove from the living room had an open vent, so heat could rise up to warm the rooms above it. Back in that day, there were many house fires because the chimneys would catch fire. The ashes would build up inside the flue pipe here, and those would get hot as they went through the walls, and before it got into the brick chimney, it would catch fire in the house. So there are more than too many fire in the home. And that's before they had a very efficient fire department. The fire department back then was just a line of people holding buckets of water, and they would pass the buckets from one person to the next, all the way from the well. Or if they had a horse stable that had a big trough of water in it. So fires would usually burn the house down. And back then, the churches would help people whose house burned down. They would take up collections to try to make the financial recovery for your home. So in this bedroom, some very special things happen. I'll tell you about those in just a minute. You see the rugs on the floor, or you see this rug here? You could buy a roll of these things. They're called rags. They would roll them up. You get little sections of rags and you'd tie them together and you'd roll them up onto a big ball like this. We used to have 3 of these balls, but you would take these 2 and you'd weave them together. Oh, here's the 3rd ball. You would sit on the floor like this and weave those together into a little rug like this for keeping your feet warm when you got out of bed or something like that, maybe in the bathroom. Oh, did you see the bathroom, by the way? That's because there wasn't a bathroom in this house. Where do you think it was? Outside. Oh. Back then they didn't have pipes. They didn't have plumbing. So if you had to use the bathroom, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. You'd either have to put all your clothes back on, or you'd have a pot, a little urinal for your urinal. So maybe that's why it's good not to drink a lot of water before you go to bed. One day Mrs. White was making some rugs and she was sitting on the floor, and James White came home and he was singing a song. He said there'll be no rag rugs in heaven, because he thought it was time consuming for his wife to make rugs because of what she was doing, and he didn't mind her relaxing a little bit, but I think he might have been just a little bit uptight about her making these rugs when she could have been doing other things. So I think she took up knitting instead. Now here's something. Before you go to bed at night, you put on your nice warm socks, so when you got under the covers, you could keep your feet warm through the night. Sometimes you would put a little tin like this and put your socks in here and put this on top of the heater so your socks would be nice and warm when you put them on before you got into bed at night. Do any of you have an electric blanket? Sandy, I think I just want to look at a couple things. Now you just wanted to look at a couple things because you had some hungry children.
Oh, hungry children. Okay.
I think he went on.
We want to get a picture with Ellen G. White.
He more.
He cái hình.
He every thing of them.
Yang ngân không ya boy. Yang ngân thế một kinh.
Cái này của tí à? Cái của tí à?
Đồng yếu đồng.
Cái à?
희야겠지.
힘을 안 신는 거
아까
비.
갓백도 해봐. 저 요즘엔
cái 거의 해야지 đi.
각집은 막
làm đi phần lô hồi dần thế.
발로 해도
là cái gì? cái liền đầu điệp